start from the beginning, which as you very well, all of us very well know, is not the absolute beginning, but it is just a moment that we take as a beginning to start this conversation. We'll start from the time just before your conception, as that background has got a lot of information. So what was the historical background around the year of your conception, which Klaus was, which year? Which year were you conceived?
1957 was the conception.
1957. So what was the historical and the cultural, political background of that time in Germany, in the place where you were conceived?
Yes. Yes. I was born in March 1958, 13 years after the apocalypse of the World War II. And my father had been a soldier in the war and in captivity, and lost one brother in Russia. And my mother had witnessed the destruction of our small hometown, Xanten. It's 10,000 inhabitants. It was totally destroyed in January 1945. And I felt the traumatic atmosphere of these horrors as a child. We played in the grounds where the destroyed houses are beside us. Yes, I felt the traumatic atmosphere of these horrors as a child, and was in a traumatic symbiosis with my environment. And I learned that something fundamental needed to be healed. Of course, as a child, I did not know what needed to be healed and how, but I could feel it. And since my grandfather, the mother of my father, died in my seventh month of pregnancy, and my mother was in postpartum depression in my first month of life. So I felt from the beginning that healing could only lie in learning to distinguish transgenerational, prenatal, and postnatal trauma. How I say, you can't know it as a child, but you can feel it.
You will speak more about how this can be uncovered later on. But that was the background, a rather sad background because of the aftermath of the war, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And what was the name of your mother?
Maria.
And your father?
Norbert.
Marias. Yeah. And your father?
Maria or Norbert. Norbert.
Yes. What were these qualities or values or even challenges or opportunities in that background in time and space?
My parents were very loving and generous, and only conditionally strict.
Yeah.
I learned from them a certain sobriety and pragmatism and modesty, but without neglecting intuition and imagination. And they offered me a lot of space for discovery. To save, the place was safe, but I felt the traumatic fields of the system like a heavy burden and a big shadow. No? There was a lot of darkness on the one side, and the other side it was a little town, and with a lot of very nice landscape, and we could play as child everywhere. It was good, yes. It was a good founding for creativity and freedom. Yes. But our parents had to build up their houses and had the stress. Yeah.
And when you speak about this, you speak about both your parents, both mom and dad. Could you speak a little bit more specifically about Maria's values, which you really appreciated and made good use of that? Or the same was for both?
Yeah. Yeah, there was on one side charity and love, and then in the other side it was her depression. In addition to the war traumas, my mother suffered very severe traumas. She lost her mother at the age of 14. And after several years of infirmity, she died of tuberculosis, a disease that could have been easily cured a few years later. It was 1941 that my grandmother died. And this loss of mother and the resulting abandonment were great pain for my mother. And this period also included the loss of 4 young men, all of whom died as soldiers in Russia. And all 4 were the sons of a close family with whom she said she had close contact. And I think she was probably in love with all 4 of them as a 10 or 12-year-old girl. And so my mother always carried a deep pain under her caring and loving attention. I think my artistic and therapeutic development have always also had this origin to fathom the mother in her hidden layers. And my father was working in a salt mine nearby, and he had built up this salt mine after the war. And he was a good handcraft man. Could build everything. And so I learned to make the things by my own hands. it's a good, yeah,
gift from them.
it's good to know that you can build a lot of things
Right.
in the house and so. Yeah.
And when they met, the time when they met, and your mom and your dad,
Yeah.
what was it, you think, that brought them together?
Yeah, I think they married at 1950, and it was this hard time after the war, and they know themselves since childhood.
Oh.
They lived in the same street in this little town. Oh, yeah, and I think they could they could love each other because they both are very standing on the ground. Bodenständig, ne, in German, it's the expression. Yeah, but it was a time with the hope of a new future and freedom and peace after this apocalypse and this terrible paranoia of the humanity. And it was a new beginning.
Right. So this element of hope brought them together after a long getting to know or knowing each other. And how would you describe their relationship as you have experienced this relationship?
Yeah, what I say, it's I think it's difficult in German too. I have a little bit right about my first interests as a child, because besides of the family archaeology, I also grew up in a place steeped in history. Xanten is a small town on the Lower Rhine in the far west of Germany, and this town had a rich Roman and also medieval past. And I was interested as a child in how earlier cultures and family systems had lived in the stone remains of the Roman and medieval town. And as a young man, I also earned money in the vacation jobs, in the archaeological excavations, and also guided tourist groups through the ancient Roman city. And thus, from the beginning, there was an interest in collective psychohistorical and individual systemic connections. And my parents supported this interests. My father came on from a big family. His his grandfather has had 12 children, and all the 12 children are come into an age over 80 and 90 years. All the 12. So it's very astonishing. The family of my mother was small, and there were more diseases come in and pain. So it was. My father had more the part of the joy of life or the power of life, and my mother had more the part of sadness and a good power too, but more melancholic fields.
Very interesting polarity, Klaus. Very interesting polarity. Were there any siblings in the family? Brothers, sisters? Any siblings in the family?
Yeah, my sister is. I have a sister. She's 3 years older than me, and I have a brother who is 10 years younger.
Right.
So we are three.
Right. And how would you let us know a little bit about your elder sister? What was your relationship with her? What kind of person is she as a child and an adolescent later?
Yeah, we were a good team, my sister and me, but she has early met her own friends and girlfriends, and I met my boyfriends, and so we make some things together. But yeah, and she's now an artist too, and she works in China and in England and international.
Right.
On international path. And my little brother is living in this small town, still in the small town, in the house of my parents. Yes.
Is he an artist as well?
No, he is. He's working as an informatic manager in the same factory where my father works.
Right. So actually, your father's work was what? We did not say that.
Yeah. What is the expression? Schlosser. In German, it's Schlosser. At first, he has learned to work with steel and so, but later he comes in a higher position and in a leading position in this salt mine.
Right. And your mother, what was it that she dedicated her time if she had a career or a job?
No, my mother was a housewife, and yeah, she must leave the school when her mother died, no? When she was 13 years old. And later she was a housewife, yes.
Right. So when did you first started to discover that art is good for you, or that you are an artist? Was it in your childhood, later on? When?
Yeah, I started with painting with 14, 15 in school with pencil. So I made the whole time in the school drawings.
Yes.
And then I was influenced by a fatherly friend who combined pastoral and artistic work. And he had a small gallery where I exhibited my painting for the first time when I was 18 years old. And this is also where my interest in the connections between therapeutic and aesthetic culture began. And this was then strengthened by studying painting at the Academy of Art in Düsseldorf in the end of the 70s and beginning of the 80s. And teachers like Tony Craig or Gerhard Höhme influenced my further intellectual development. And from the beginning, my painting was a research work on individual and collective original images. Although it was this question, where do inner and outer images actually begin? Where do first inner experiential realities begin in ontogenesis, and where in phylogenesis? And what do these look like? What are the first images in man in our life? And this is the basic of my research work as a painter and as a analytic therapeutic man.
Was it something you always did, or was it something you developed in discovering and working with? I mean, even when you were a child and you were at school and you handed those drawings of yours during classes, now on reflection, were these drawings depictions of the primal images, the inner images?
At first, it was wonderful to try out all kinds of pictorial forms in my own small studio at home and in the large studios of the Art Academy, to try out many levels of drawing and painting and to address all of this again and again in a relation to my own psyche. And to observe similar processes in the other students as well, and in the teachers as well. And all of them were researching their own aesthetic questions, which are ultimately nothing other than questions of relationship to the world. and their beginnings in their own lives, but most of them don't reflected these questions. But I reflected this question. Of course, this was not yet as clear to me as it is today, but sensitively I could always relate a person's art to that whole person and his or her history. And art shows very directly how someone in the world feels and feels. And so it was a lot of fun and totally serious at the same time.
Like the polarity you mentioned, the father and the mother, fun or a lot of high energy and then a little bit of sadness in the mother. So you can see this dance in your paintings as well, you mean?
Yeah. There is that there's often polarization between two powers or two energies, and that is interesting in the whole aesthetic reflection. That's the female aesthetic energy and the male aesthetic energy is, you can feel in the art, in every artwork, and every artist of whether he is a man or whether he's a wife or a female, is one of the energies to make paintings or to make art. There's a good sentence. Art is one of the best solutions to connect the parents in somebody.
Right. Okay, so going back to your first inspirator, what was there in him that inspired you to start focusing your energy on painting, and you started your first, let's say, artistic exhibitions back in the teens, late teens years? What was there in that person?
You asked the first exhibition, or?
Yeah, when you say 16, 17 years old, when you were an adolescent, you mentioned a very, the name of a...
I think it's very important for every painter that images and pictures and paintings are, you don't need words or expressions. You can put your feelings directly into colors and into forms. And later I could understand that it is a work on the foundation forms of life. If you paint a lot, then you come directly at last in a deep regression, and when you're an abstract painter, and then you come in very deep regressions in your individual biography and in the systemic biography. And so that was further the question in my painting, if in the aesthetic forms and discoveries I both want to make the world happy with new images, but how much do these images also say something about my entire history, and maybe about the history of the early time of every man and every so art theory at that time and still today dealt too anxiously with the findings of the human sciences, especially with the findings of developmental psychology. And so in my further aesthetic and philosophical research, I had a few semesters of philosophy at the University of Düsseldorf in addition to painting, and I came across with psychoanalytic art theory and finally prenatal psychology in the question of the regression possibilities in art. And Jürgen Vogt in Cologne or Ludwig Janus in Heidelberg became my decisive stimulators and companions. But the breakthrough to connect this aesthetic and the psychologic knowing was, of course, my therapeutic self-awareness of my prenatal trauma. That was a bridge through which the entire context of my emotional and pictorial world suddenly began to show itself. And that was already 5 years after my studies in Düsseldorf. But that was an important point, that I could feel my pain as a fetus in the 7th month when the father of my mother died. And this I learned in my self-awareness, and to feel that and to go back in this area and to go before this this time. And so, but that was a very important point in my psychological research, besides aesthetic research, and that was on this point the things come together more and more.
Right.
The aesthetic and the knowing about the emotional backgrounds of paintings or of art.
So how long have you been working with Ludwig Janus? In one way or the other?
Yeah, Ludwig Janus what was not my therapist.
Yes.
But collaboration with Ludwig Janus grew up in 1995, I think, starts, and then grew in many joint conference and congress experiences. He invited me to give lectures, and we worked together both on the levels of cultural and psychohistorical and therapeutic significance of prenatal psychology. And then I was able to meet many other pioneers of PP in many national and international events of the ISPPM. And all this work also led through many publications, finally to the joint publication of the German Lehrbuch der pränatalen Psychologie 2014 and the English Handbook of Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology 2020 with Ludwig Janus and Rupert Linder. And you know it, in both books we have created a fundamental theoretical basis for PP with many authors, so that PP is prenatal psychology is perceived as a scientific discipline.
Right. So getting to know other people in among the pioneers of prenatal psychology, apart from Ludwig Janus, could you speak about any of them who had an influence or an inspiration for you over these 20-25 years?
Yeah, I have read a lot of things from other authors. Very important were the meeting with Carlton Terry. And my self-awareness in this early regression settings from sperm journey and egg journey. That was very important and wonderful. It was for me the way from my psychotherapy and art therapy more in the body psychotherapy. It was a beginning from these three levels. Also my work with Helga Blasi, with Carlton Terry, with Emerson, and others was very important. Yeah, Franz Rengli, Helga Fink. With Helga Fink, I work in the university in Nürtingen since 10 years, about 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the main findings as you work and develop, either in your studio or in collaboration with other pioneers or other influential people you have met? How can you see this development of understanding over the years, over the time?
Yeah, the most important results are the reality and imprinting power of the experiential realities of the first 9 months of life and birth. The famous sentence of a developmental psychologist, 9 plus 36 is equal 90 can be scientifically formulated. 9 months of prenatal life and 36 months of the first 3 years of life add up to 90% of the somatic and psychological imprinting for human life. And the prenatal psychology and the medical research of the prenatal programming, as well as the biological research of the transgenerational imprints and the systemic transgenerational psychology, result in an overall picture of the human existence, which helps much more than so far consciously to overcome the still far-reaching immaturity of the human being. So we can, in a future nosology, we can understand much more comprehensively the somatic and psychological wholeness of man, and have additional healing possibilities for so far etiologically unexplained connections. So we can clearly distinguish transgenerational prenatal and postnatal trauma with the help of PP and contribute to mental health. And culturally, we can better understand the origins of destructive violence and cruelty, and ultimately make them obsolete. Yeah, also the violent enactments of wars, how in the Ukraine now, are nothing but malignant regressions. And therapeutic reflection is still too little possible and effective there, so that the compulsion to repeat only generates violence again and again, instead of reflecting and treating the original effects. And that's, I think that's a very big meaning of prenatal psychology, not only in the psychotherapy, so as well in the political psychology or psychohistorical and culture sciences.
Klaus, since we are in your studio, would it be good for you to use to take or show one of the paintings that are around you, and give us an example of what you discover in any of the images of the paintings, either clients of yours or yours?
Mm-hmm. Gucken. Can you? Yeah, you can.
Yes,
see that.
please. Great. So what is there in your eyes, not in my eyes, or
Yeah.
the yeah.
Yeah, the the feeling as a painter is that you touch with color a field or room, yeah, and this form is an important form since 1 year, and it's form which comes out of my intuition. It's not an intellectual form,
Right.
and I think you can see that two circle forms come together or
Away or going away.
or away. Yes, maybe like a first cell division or other early body experiences when we all were only a cell.
Yes.
And the nidation is a very complicated process for come in a new room and a new environment, and the question is, or what is very important is that the blastocyst makes their own room for building the placenta. So it's an early process in our lives that we go in new rooms and create new rooms before we can fill them. Or that is an it's a body experience, and it's an emotional experience. It's intellectual experience. It's in all levels. And this painting is a connection or in this both forms, and this form, which you can read as a pain or as a joy.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened here is like a mystery. You can read it positive, you can read it as a danger. So in all my paintings this is a theme, which qualities of which conditions of building of rooms or spaces or meetings in our early existence happens. And these paintings are completely come out on the intuition and not on the thinking about, or they are not planned.
Right.
Planned, yeah.
So actually, Klaus, what you have created or depicted is a moment in the continuum of your being, and especially the moment of nidation.
For example,
Right?
yes.
Right. And you said that it is you, whoever you is, that creates the spaces, the rooms, and then you see how this rooms feel, right?
Yes, and it's not only one movement; it's a thousand of movements. We in our existence in pregnancy before we are born,
Right.
and this qualities I call it prenatal aesthetic.
Right.
It's a research for the early feelings or the early sensibility and the early the beginnings of feelings.
Which also shows or lets us realize that the unborn, and you speak about implantation very early stage, we already exist.
Mhm.
And we experience.
Mhm.
We do not wait for later months or the moment of our birth to be or become or be born as sentient beings. We are already sentient beings, right?
Mhm.
Is that what you discover?
Yes, it's one describing of this.
Description. One description. Yes.
One description. Yes. Yeah, it's the artist, or the artist is the searching of an artist is to go into this times of existence before the language, before the
Pre-verbal stage.
before the symbols, and that is a very interesting qualities, aesthetic qualities from our basic life.
And since, Klaus, you have extensively worked with cancer patients or people who have health challenges in their life, what can you see in their drawings or paintings? Is there any example near you which you can use and speak a little bit like the way you presented the painting just now?
What it is important that the patients have the feeling they may, or it's allowed to show feelings and to show their pain at last. And paintings are a good bridge to the to this hidden feelings and to these parts of our psyche which is blocked. And paintings can open these areas very simple and directly, but you need a professional setting to
Yeah.
That these things are possible. And every symptom, every pain in life, or every trauma has a beginning. Yeah, the first traumata are the most important imprints, and the later traumata connect only to the first traumata. And when you can work with a patient over a few months or years, maybe, when there is a psychosis or schizophrenia or so, you can heal the ancient pain or the primal pain, and then the healing is the best way for the future.
Right.
That's the most important thing, to come to this primal pain or primal trauma, because all other which come later are really not so important. They the later traumata come they come in the structure of the first trauma,
Which we actually
and
as,
the
yes.
the biggest problem of most of the patients are the misconnection between father and mother. That's das größte Problem. The biggest
Yes.
problem. And out this or from this problem, the diseases and the disturbing and the problems grow up in life.
So actually, as you are sharing your experience working with humans, with people facing health challenges, what are some of the lessons that you would like to share with us so that these lessons can be taken into account when we reflect on our life, our realities and decisions? You spoke about this disconnection, or whatever, quality connection between mom and dad, and this is connected with disease in the children born. What else have you discovered?
Oh, that's not only my discovery.
Yes.
Meistermann Seeger was a pioneer in Germany. She was lecturer in the University of Cologne, and she had said this, and it's right. That's the problem of the world. Every man and woman are in their love not ideal or not 100% only love, and so, but ich muss noch mal eben gucken, Yes. I'm looking for one expression. Yeah, the incompatibility between
Incompatibility, right?
his father and mother, and so bigger this is, so bigger the problems for the child. You
Right.
can and that you can see in every therapy with the patients, with cancer patients, with schizophrenia patients, with other problems and diseases, and that's a very important thing for psychotherapy.
Right.
Because
so the health of the children is associated with the quality of a relationship between mom and dad, or the parents, right?
Yeah, the child has to build his own life, and he or she is more than the mixing of father and mother, but the problem for the human life is to bring father and mother together in a new life, and we need 20, 30, 50, 60, 80 years for this for this thing, or 90 years until death.
Right.
That's our power, our energy to heal something, or to bring together the incompatibility of the parents' love.
So actually, just to round this a little bit, working with your patients over the many decades, are there important messages that you have come up with, and that would be wise for us to share, to learn? In general, as not as professionals or academics or a specific population, but generally, what is it? What is the most important message?
The most important message is every human being asks the central question: can I love? And am I loved? That's a both important question for our life.
Right. So the important thing, because you placed it first, is can I love? Can I love?
Yeah.
That is the most important thing. Right.
Yeah, aber most patients have the two questions: can I love and am I loved? That's actually the work.
Right.
What's happened, and which which patterns in the system, family systems, which patterns of love exists in the family patterns, the family system. Yeah, that's a deep questions of life, and there's deep questions of disease.
So if I can love, if the answer is yes, I can love, what is the impact in my life or to my health? If I can answer and if I can experience love, the way philosophers, artists, theology people speak about love, if I can experience that, what is the impact this will have on my health?
Love, it's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of learning the whole life.
Right.
It's learning how can we love each and made the connection between human beings better. And we are not on an end. We need a few hundred years in the future to learn and learn and learn. And the families are the ground of the culture of human being.
So actually what I read is that as humanity, we are very early stages of love experience, right? And so what we hear or what we say, I love you, is perhaps something else, not exactly what you are talking about. But in this hypothesis, in humanity 5,000 Anno Domini, when this work is a little bit better, are we expected to see better health or worse health, disease? Is love connected with health or is love connected with disease?
I think as a process of civilization that we have learned a lot about love in the last 5,000 years, and we are better now than
yes, in the past
5,000 years ago. but we have to do more and more because the Enlightenment, it's 200 years ago, was only the beginning of a deeper reflection about these questions. No? And Freud maybe was the second enlightenment, and the prenatal psychology is the third enlightenment. And we are in the beginning of this work.
So what would you like to send as a message, as an important message to parents, to mothers and fathers today?
Yeah, that the child is a new human being. It's not an object or not property. It's a new and it's foreign. It's unknown. It's not known. And every mother and every father had has to reflect about their own biography and their own traumata, and worked with that, and je besser, also when I do it as a father more, then then my child has more freedom, and more possibilities. But when I work too little and with my problems, then my child has to solve a lot of problems which are mine or my wife, and then there is less freedom for the child.
Right. So parents, work on yourself.
Yeah.
And take care of your challenges, or do your self-awareness, self-development, because this frees the potentiality of your child and things like that. And what is your message to the younger generation of professionals?
Oh, there's a lot of messages.
Yeah.
You have to read my books.
Yes. And we will.
Now I think it's no other way than to build up our democratic forms with a therapeutic culture. We have to solve our unsolved traumata, and the unsolved traumata from our family systems come back in the future as a war, as a disease, as a abortion or something, as an accident or so. So we have to work more and more to with our images of destruction and cruelty, and we have to work on our fun about or with this cruelty images or destruction images. Freud sagte, sprach von der Lust an der Zerstörung, ne? The fun of destruction. That we have to reflect and to work with this irritation and dysfunction patterns in our family systems.
And with scholars or academicians or researchers, the ones who are dedicated to creating more meaning out of our life, what is the message you would like to send?
Yeah, war begins in the families, and thus every human being is challenged to work on own destruction pictures instead of projecting them on the world. Destruction goes very fast, but to build something good takes much longer. And the World Health Organization informs that 1/3 of all pregnancies worldwide are unwanted and unsafe. The toxic womb syndrome. of course, the couple is always responsible, not the woman alone. So we have to reckon with the fact that 1/3 of mankind basically does not feel safe in the world and carries a great anger and fear within itself, which is expressed again and again, for example, in such statings of violence as in the Ukraine now. And so the permanent peace work always starts first in the families, and then it can be sustainable in the world in open and creative democratic societies instead of autocratic systems of coercion. So our responsibility is a fundamental peace work to resolve the human paranoia.
Which, if politicians hear you and hear this, what would be wise for them to do? As politicians have got tools to support directions of peace or towards peace or destruction. What should they take into account?
The politician can only make things which are in the population are in a good level. So we have to build on our aesthetic and therapeutic levels and fields and cultures. That's the only way
Right.
for the future.
So what would life be like if you were not born? And when I say you, I mean you, Klaus, but mainly you as the value added to the humanity itself. What would life be like if you were not born?
Then unfortunately, 4 wonderful children would not exist. And they are an important and essential part of the current reality situation, my 4 children. They hold the treasures of unfathomable surprise, which I am so excited about. But in the same way, we are all only part of a big whole. And if I had not made these books and publications, or I had not painted the pictures, others would have done it, as happens.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would change from this moment in the now, if you could go back in your history, and if yes, in which ways and why?
No, it is what it is.
It is what it is, right? Yeah. There is a question asked by Daniela, and she asks, what if one of the parents refuses to process his or her own trauma?
Yeah. That's a problem, but you have to go your way, and when your husband or do not work on his own traumata, it is his decision, but he has a responsibility for that too. You can't press somebody into this work. No? It's freedom. But in important points in parship, you have to risk the parship when you see that development is not more in the responsibility of both. Parships can only grow up, and the love can only grow up when we work together and we show our fear, our anger, and we can fight together.
Right.
And it's very important to learn bonding and parship and love, and it's work. It's a lot of work. The whole life.
Yeah. So no matter what the decision of the other person is, you do what.
They're not simple ways.
So thank you very much. Before we stop, we conclude our interview tonight. Is there anything else you would like to add so that we bring it to our lives? For the road, one last word from you.
So, yeah, I think the most important things I've said, war begins in the families, and love begins in the families too. That's our work. But we now know a lot more about our paranoia than 50 years before, and the prenatal psychology is really a bridge between the transgenerational traumata and the postnatal traumata, and the knowing about that. And so the prenatal psychology is a missing link. That's a chance.
Thank you very much, Klaus.
Thank
you. And keep creating images and representations that help this world go to the next step.
Thank you very much, and sorry for my bad English. And thank you for invitation.